Hey, Katie. And thanks so much to Chrissy and Leslie for that, for really opening up and making that important call to action. Now, joining me here to discuss how we can best use the lessons learned from the pandemic to accelerate health innovation, I'd like to welcome Jim Weiss, who is the founder and chief executive of Real Chemistry, for a sponsored conversation. Welcome, Jim.
Hey, Matt. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. You've been in this business a long time, 30 years, going back to Genentech, where you helped launch some of the real first products in biotechnology. How unprecedented in your experience has what we saw with the speed of COVID vaccine development? How different was this from what you've seen before?
Well, I think it's not that unusual when you're thinking about drugs for infectious disease and those things, because we do see those tend to move a little faster if you see success early on. But as far as the annals of any type of drug development, it's clearly the fastest we've ever seen. But more importantly, the distribution and rollout. Normally that takes, as many know, having worked on your side of it, there is hesitancy and resistance to new technology that can take as long as a decade to overcome. And, with mixed data signals, and it takes many, many years of continued data, presentations, additional information, testimonial, et cetera, it can take a decade. And now we're seeing, as much as 70% of the population in some counties in the United States already vaccinated.
So what's the lesson, do you think, for the rest of the industry going forward? I mean, is this something that we can do in Alzheimer's or in cancer? I mean, how does this change the game?
Well, we always say necessity is the mother of invention. And, we look at the situation here, we shut down economies, schools, the concept of, getting moms back to work and into, not having to, school their kids at home, that additional burden. So I think we should be looking at all these other areas in a very similar way. I think there have been attempts to do that with the cancer moonshot. Prior to that, Nixon in the 70s had put something forth in a similar way. But I think, that's had its ups and downs over the years. I think HIV is the closest thing we've ever seen, where maybe there was this sort of, and to some extent, Ebola. The infectious diseases, of course, tend to spread more quickly, rapidly. The things that have been around for many, many years, killing us all for a long time, like cardiovascular diseases and diabetes and cancer, all, now Alzheimer's is obviously with an aging population, I think is becoming more clear. I think mental health, parts of mental health are getting addressed through the digital health channels, right? You're seeing that more persistent. So I would say, again, the pandemic has sped that more than we'd seen in many, many years, because they sort of go together. But I think there's an opportunity to show, when you can show that you can do something, a lot of times people feel like, all right, now by this positive example, we can do more.
I'm fascinated by that. So is everything going to be measured by Operation Warp Speed now? And how does that change the way companies and executives are going to think about both development and distribution of new medicines?
Yes, I do think that for sure we're going to see that happening. I mean, we've already seen a trend, with antibodies and with immunotherapy, and now RNA and DNA. You and I were talking about the fact that RNA has been around forever, the concept of it, but, now can it be applied more, widely to a lot more disease areas, which I think it can. So this positive case emboldens everybody else. And I absolutely think that will heighten the pressure and competition. And I have been around for 30 years and I haven't seen the amount of interest and investment and excitement. And I had said, we had a hard time, just recruiting kids into our field and people into our field. And just this year, we had 7,000, applicants for our internship program for 25 spots, which just shows a higher interest. Now, will that dissipate as we open up and the world opens up and people go back to normal life? Yes, I think that'll happen. But I think more and more people care about healthcare, care about innovation and science and tech in a way that perhaps they didn't before.
Now, speaking from your experience, give me some insight on why it kind of took this. Why did it take a pandemic, right? I mean, you always thought it was the most central thing. That was why you chose to start working here and then to build a communications business in healthcare. So why and you've been trying to convince the world this whole time, right? So how is it, what's taken so long?
Well, I think the issue is that, people don't really want to think about their health until they have to. It's sort of the normal thing, but we all grew up with, grandmothers and grandfathers and people saying there's nothing more important than your health. But until you see someone have a health problem, you don't tend to deal with it. We don't deal in prevention. But that's the easiest way to take care of healthcare, is to stay well, rather than to treat it. But I think also people didn't understand or thought the scientific terms were too, hard to access and didn't really feel like it was something that mattered as much. Now on the evening news and on the internet and everywhere, it's sort of vaccines all the time. People didn't know how to pronounce epidemiologists, let alone what one was, so, now.
You told me in the early days that the term personalized medicine, which is it's on the tip of everybody's tongue. It seems almost quaint now, but people had a lot of trouble getting that.
Yeah, when I came to Genentech, we were taught to follow the data to get to the right outcome. The concept was, in cancer therapy in particular, let's use biomarkers. That Herceptin was really one of the first, as you know, in breast cancer, to identify specific patients who would benefit from this therapy. That'll make them more likely to get a positive outcome. And now that's truer and truer of more and more categories of health. And, I think personalized medicine is how this is going now. I mean, one of the missions of the firm that I started is about putting the power of tech and data in the hand and communications in the hands of the patient. Now you can control perhaps your own destiny. I think you and I were talking about vaccine scheduling was like, tantamount to getting concert tickets. We were teaching people about how to use new technology to access better care for yourself.
Yeah.
And you can do that now.
I don't know the last time I went to a concert where I had that much trouble getting tickets. Eager to get back to that. But, right. So and just you mentioned your business, but the new name, Real Chemistry. Why? What's the give us a sense of what that means to you?
Well, it means, sort of in the macro sense that it's going to take a lot of partnership, but that's exactly what happened in Warp Speed. You have to have real chemistry among all the parts of healthcare. The patient needs to be talking, productively to the caregiver, the doctor, with clarity in order to get the best outcomes. So it takes real chemistry for people to work together. I call it, you can have all the best science, data, technology, solutions, but if you're not, collaborating, integrating, and connecting the dots, you don't really create the, catalytic interactions that cause the innovation that we're trying to seek in the world and the breakthroughs, or just getting a good treatment that gets you to get you to good health. So that's really what it means.
So just in your last thought, if you had advice to companies trying to keep urgency here, trying to build on the Warp Speed urgency, what would it be if you want to kind of bottle that and put that lightning in a bottle? How do you think the industry should do that?
Well, I think it's get focused. I've talked about this with a lot of folks. Get really laser focused on the category of disease you're going to go after, and get your collaborators lined up. And I do think that you've got to work in collaboration with international as well as regulatory and government scientific parties, also patient advocacy groups. Get those people in early and often, and think about also with the end in mind. How is this going to be paid for? How is this going to get to people? I think it's not just science for science sake. It's not a science experiment. It's how are we going to get this made at scale, distributed at scale, and paid for and at access for the widest population, diverse and inclusive population. That's how to be thinking about this as we go forward.
All right. Thanks so much, Jim. That's about all the time we have, but thanks for joining us, and it's great to see you.
Matt.
You have a great rest of your day there.
You too, man. Take care.
You too. Bye.